Sorry about that. The video broke in half by accident. All right, coming in at number 7 is Mark Henry, the world's strongest man. Now, Mark Henry got his start in professional wrestling in the late 1990s. He went to the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia. That's when we had the USA Olympic Dream Team. You know, you had Jason Kidd, you had Gary Payton. I think you had David Robinson or Tim Duncan on the Dream Team in 1996. And Kurt Angle was there. Kurt Angle was wrestling with a broken neck. Is well documented. A lot of people talk about it. He won a gold medal with a broken neck. So Kurt Angle was there. The basketball dream team was there. Muhammad Ali carried the torch to start the 1996 Olympic Games. And in the weightlifting competition, you had Mark Henry, who lifted by far, like I think the heaviest. I'm not sure if it was between 1,200 to maybe 1,700 pounds. Like, that's a record that would get broken maybe less than 20 years later. And he got discovered by WWE. And then the next time I turn around, it's 96, 97. He's on television on Monday Night Raw. And the fact that his first match on Raw would be against Jerry the King Lawler. Because Larry the King Lawler was like making fun of him. And that's how they start their story. And then he got into matches. Of course, there's his story of being sexual chocolate. Then there was, I'm Mark Henry, I'm Big Mark. And then it wasn't until the later 2000s that he became a guy that you don't want to be in the ring with. Like, he would get you real good. And then it wasn't until 10 years into his career that he went with the gimmick, I am the Silverback. And he had his theme song changed. And then he started lifting cars and trucks. And then he beat the crap out of Dave Batista, which as a wrestling fan, I was mad because he injured Batista and Batista could no longer defend the title. And it was a non-televised event. Like, that was the one thing I was robbed of as a wrestling fan, because I wanted to see this televised event, Batista versus Mark Henry, and they wouldn't show it. And when he lost to Kurt Angle in a championship match in 2006, going into 2007, he injured Kurt Angle. And Kurt Angle had to vacate the title. And then Undertaker got the title, and then he injured Undertaker. It was like he was just taking people out, and then they made him champion like 2.5 years later. And I was like, why you gotta make a guy wait almost 12 years in his career to be champion? Like, when he became the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, he fought Big Show, he fought Kane, he beat Viscera, God rest his soul, rest in peace. He beat the Great Khali. He fought legitimate contenders in ECW. But a lot of the matches he had in the 90s, he was just jobbing out to them, which I didn't like that. Like, why you got to keep losing to The Rock? Why you got to keep losing to Triple H and Stone Cold? Why you got to lose to all these other guys? And it wasn't until much later that they took a look and pushed him. And then he got injured. And then he got to the point where he wasn't being used as much. And to me, the one thing that Mark Henry's career should have had was multiple championships. He should have won the title at least 3 times. You could have done a storyline where he beats Kane or Undertaker to win the belt. It would have had a big major impact. Putting him on ECW was like a slap in the face to wrestling fans that expected him to win the title. It was like you could have done more with Mark Henry's character instead of waiting until much later to do his character's justice. And when you see him later today, close to retiring, it kind of makes you wonder what we could have got and we never got. The best matches I saw him in the 2000s was Mark Henry versus Goldberg. Like, that was a monster matchup because he could match strength and power with Goldberg. And the fact that he wrestled Goldberg twice and show that he could beat him is like, well, if he beat Goldberg, he could have won the belt. It's like, what's wrong with y'all? And then the fact that he wrestled Triple H 3 times was impressive. And then the fact that he could do that against other guys, half his size, and his match at WrestleMania against Undertaker, if anyone could have actually broken the streak, it should have been Mark Henry, but for company reasons, they wanted Undertaker to win the match. I felt that Mark Henry got some on his resume, but to me, just imagine if they would have allowed Undertaker to be champion and then have Mark Henry fight him, it would have made the match more entertaining. So to me, Mark Henry's like another version of Vader because the intimidation factor, the idea that you got to wrestle somebody like that, a guy that can move cars, that can move trucks like that. And you see Braun Strowman is like a callback to Mark Henry. In fact, before he quit, they did actually face off a number of times. All right, number 6 is the Big Show, Paul White. Now, the Big Show was like a young version of the Giant. When he came to WCW in the 1990s, he was nothing like we had never seen before. Like, this guy was like a second coming of Andre the Giant. Like, you saw Andre the Giant and Big Show. The way Andre the Giant choke slam someone, Big Show choke slam someone. The way Big Show would scream is the way Andre would scream. And people drawing big comparisons to the way he would go in the ring and wrestle. Now, he's someone who had a longer career where big guys, his height, 7'1", 500 pounds at that time. The fact that he could beat world heavyweight champion like 2 times in WCW, 4-time tag team champion, the fact that he got to wrestle his idol Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, the fact that he got to wrestle Sting, Lex Luger, and then the fact that he got to be a part of the NWO was like, that was in his prime. And he got better because then he all of a sudden goes to WWE, and right away they put him in a system. The fact that he could wrestle Undertaker and Kane the way he did, like, they made a story where Undertaker was just whooping everybody's butt, and the only one that could basically stand up to him was Big Show. And one of the best matches in that was on Monday Night Raw, 1998-99. He chokeslammed Undertaker, and it was through the ring. That's how strong Big Show was. And the fact that we never got to find out who really won that matchup. They had a rematch, and the match ended in controversial. Then we got to see a rematch years later where Undertaker won. He wrestled Kane, and then he became the WWE champion. And the fact that he managed to hold on to the title, and then he had his title reign ended by Triple H, which he made Triple H look good in that matchup. And Triple H made him look good in the match. For almost a month, he held on to the title. Then Big Show got fired, and then they would bring him back, and he would have a new personality character. And then the fact he would go on to win the tag team title 6 times. When he tag teamed with Kane, you weren't going to never win the tag team titles. And then the fact that he would be in matchups later on in his career to solidify him. He eventually would win the WWE title for the second time. United States title, television title. And then he would go on to have good matches. Now, the one thing that hurt his career was the fact that he had to lose a lot of weight and he had to adjust his abilities around other wrestlers. And when he quit and done boxing, it was like, wrestlers don't do that. And then when he come back to the WWE, he had his little high-profile beef with Floyd Mayweather. But the one thing that I thought would have made him bigger is if I could have gotten it. And to this very day, I don't think we'll never get it. Big Show versus Shaquille O'Neal. There was one moment in history where we could have actually got it. I would have loved to see what would have happened if it was Shaq versus Big Show. They was talking trash about each other for like almost 10 years. And it's like, you could make the match at WrestleMania. And we never got it. The closest we got to that is when Shaq threw Big Show over the top rope and Big Show was embarrassed, like, how dare you throw me over the top rope? And the fact that Shaq never got to square up against Big Show, it's like it's a disappointment because you could have had Charles Barkley as the special guest referee. You could have had some drama in that match. Charles be the special guest referee. You know, Shaq come in with his rap music. You bring in Big Show. It could be like a callback to when we had Big John Studd versus Andre the Giant. That's what you could have done for that matchup. And it's just a shame that we'll never see it. But we got Mayweather versus, Big Show, which I don't know. Like Mayweather won, but you know that the real fight should have been Big Show versus Shaq. That's what should have happened, and it never did. All right, coming at number 5 is Psycho Sid, Sid Justice, Sid Vicious. Now, he came in the mid 1980s. Now, this guy's like 6'9", close to 7 feet tall, 255 pounds, and this guy was like He-Man, but in a twisted way. When he came with his theme song, and he called himself the Master of the Universe, you was kind of terrified of this guy. Because he had this look in his eye that if you done something wrong, you knew you was going to get it. And he got over with the crowd because he would wrestle everyone. When he got to WWE and he had matches with Ultimate Warrior, you could tell he had to do all the work because all Warrior was just doing was clotheslines and power slams. And what no one gives Sid no credit for is that Sid could wrestle. Like, Sid just weren't one of these tall guys that just body slammed you and that. Sid, this guy actually had the wrestling ability. Like, he could do counter holds. He could put you in a submission, the Bustum Crab, the bear hug. He could do all of that. And when he finally left and went to WCW, he solidified himself. Then he went back to WWE, and then he became a 2-time world champion. He won the Intercontinental title once. He became a 2-time tag team champion. And some of his best matches were in WWE. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. His best matches were in WWE. I mean, he wrestled Kevin Nash twice. He had a good WrestleMania match with The Undertaker. And Undertaker was probably going to lose to Sid because Sid was that strong. And he had matches with Bret Hart. He had matches with Owen Hart. He had matches with Shawn Michaels. And he was wrestling these guys who were half his size. And when he won the title from Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series, he got over with the fans. Yeah, he was a villain, he was a heel, but he had this huge fanfare that most characters in wrestling don't get. His theme song came from the movie Jaws. Like, when you hear that theme song, ding, 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 doom, 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 it's like you're going to have to pay. Then he got hurt. We didn't see much of him. Then he got released, and then he found himself in WCW, where I thought they did him poorly. Like, we never got to see what the range of his ability was. He had, like, at least 5 matches with Goldberg. Every time he wrestled Goldberg, he was injured. Then he wrestled Hulk Hogan. He lost the championship match. Then he wrestled Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Those were good matches. Then he had that one match we didn't expect. He wrestled Scott Steiner for the championship. And he broke his leg, which ultimately ended his wrestling career to the point where the next time we wouldn't see him, the next time we saw him wrestling, it wouldn't be until 2012, where WWE did this special called the anniversary of Monday Night Raw. They were celebrating their 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 episode, and when he came back, he still had that look where he could still hurt you. And the fact that he's a 2-time WCW heavyweight champion, 2-time WWE champion, and a 6-time tag team champion shows he's won championships with both companies. But nobody knows that he did win the ECW championship in ECW with Paul Heyman. Like, people talk about Randy Orton's character. Well, there was someone before Randy Orton that was Psycho Sid. And when people compare Randy Orton to Psycho Sid, there are similarities, but they're different athletes. Sid was much taller, much more physical. Randy Orton's leaner, but was still physical to the point where he could get you if the opportunity presented itself. Sid played the bad guy good, where in WCW he played the baby face, but they would ruin his character. And once he broke his leg against Scott Steiner, he just weren't the same. He had to retire. And to me, they don't ever acknowledge his career, which is sad. It's like, where's his DVD? How come the guy don't have a DVD? Like, all these other wrestlers can get DVDs of their best matches, but he can't get a DVD. It's sad. He had classical matchups with Vader, classic matchups with Yokozuna, and no one really talks about those matchups. Number 4, Kane. Now, before Glenn Jacobs became Kane in his wrestling career, he was known as Isaac Yankem, the evil dentist who would hurt you at the dentist. And he got to wrestle guys in his career. He was a jobber at first. And then when they wanted to tell the story of Undertaker's brother, we got Kane. When he first debuted in 98, like in October, we never saw somebody 7'1", 300 pounds with a red mask on their face. And when we had this horror theme song, golf music, it was the first time I heard some golf music. And it was pretty good because someone had a piano, somebody was working the instrumentals, and the way he came in, like the lights went out, the lights turned red, very dim. Doom dun 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 doom 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 dun 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 doom 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 It's like, oh shit. And when he tore the hinges off the door, it was like, is this man Hercules or what? And the Undertaker is like confused, like, what do I do here? Like you hear JR like, it's Kane, oh my God, it's Kane. And JR is like, well, Jerry King Lawler is like, well, that's Undertaker's brother. We heard stories. And then he knocks the Undertaker out. And you gotta remember, it was Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at Bad Blood, okay? They were in Hell in the Cell, a cage match. Shawn Michaels bled, Undertaker bled, but Undertaker was gonna win the match, and then Kane messed the match up, and Shawn Michaels retained the European Championship. That was the way Kane got introduced. And Kane managed to become a two-time WWE champion. And then they would not let him talk. So it was like they took the combination of Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street, and blended the character nicely. And in the years that came, we got the Brothers of Destruction. They won the tag titles 4 times. Kane became a 2-time WWE champion. He won the Intercontinental title 3 times. He got the team with Rob Van Dam. He got the team with Daniel Bryan. He got the team with different people. And he got to be in the company for like nearly 20 years. For like almost 20 years, Kane was around. And he fought his brother Undertaker twice at WrestleMania. And basically, the first time he wrestled Undertaker, that was the first time I thought he was going to have his record broken. Like, out of all the times you thought Undertaker was going to finally lose, this was the one time you expected. And they took the story of the Predator, where Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, Dutch, was finally going to get beat by the Predator, and right at the last minute, he beats the Predator. Undertaker beat Kane at the last minute, and you were shocked. And he had a lot of matches. Kane got to wrestle people like Shawn Michaels, Triple H. That was a good storyline where Triple H is making fun of Kane's fake girlfriend. And the fact that we got to see Kane's character more. I never thought they would do Kane versus Goldberg when they were celebrating WrestleMania 20. And the fact that he's had so many matches, so many profile matches, he versus Great Khali, Mark Henry, The Big Show, those are some good matches. But Kane could also wrestle. And it wasn't until 10 years into his career that we saw he can actually wrestle. When they finally said, let's take the mask away, let's take the hair away, and let's show what Kane really looked like, they made you wait years for you to see what he looked like. And when he got to team up with Mick Foley as Mankind, that was the highlight of his career. And then we never saw characters in wrestling fall in love. So they would make him fall in love with Chyna. Before Chyna did the storyline with Eddie Guerrero, she did it with Kane. And they did that. And then when he got to team up with Rob Van Dam, and they started putting them in commercials with the cereal. Kane was an interesting character. Now it's too bad the character ain't gonna go down in history as the best, but Kane was known as an entertaining personality. All right, coming in at number 3 is Yokozuna. Now, Yokozuna is my age, okay? Yokozuna is 34 years old when he passed away. And just recently, another wrestling fan did a video where it was revealed that he passed away at 580 pounds. Like, he was 700 pounds, then he dropped down to 580 to 500 pounds. And to me, he had a lot of promise, a lot of potential. He could have gone far in wrestling. I mean, he did become a 2-time WWE champion, a 3-time tag team champion. He did win the Intercontinental Champion once, and he did accomplish a lot of things in WWE. I mean, when he wrestled Bret Hart and took the belt away from Bret Hart, and then lost to Hulk Hogan, and then got a rematch and beat Hulk Hogan back for the belt, Yoko was beating guys that wrestlers don't ever get it. Like, you don't get a chance to wrestle people like Hulk Hogan. And when he lost to Bret Hart in the rematch, it came at the Royal Rumble. And he beat Lex Luger in his first title defense. And I remember how depressed Lex Luger was because he won the Royal Rumble in 1994 to get a shot against Yokozuna at the 1994 WrestleMania that same year. And he beat 2 guys to defend the championship belt. Bret Hart won the title back, and Kevin Nash got to be the number 1 contender, and that's when we got to see him try to go against Kevin Nash, which he did pretty good in that match. One of the best rivalries for Yokozuna was against The Undertaker. They don't talk about it too much, but he had like a bunch of matches. He wrestled Undertaker like at least 4 times. Casket match, cage match, lumberjack match. Then he got to wrestle Vader. And besides Vader doing the shooting star press, Yoko could do it too. And people were shocked that Yoko could be that big, that huge, and pull off a shooting star press. And he had weight issues. And if Yoko would have gotten a better shape, I guarantee you Yoko would be here today as a Hall of Famer. He did go into the Hall of Fame. He did win championships. It's just that his career was cut short. Like, think about it. I'm 34 years old. He passed away at my age. And we just had celebrated the anniversary of Yokozuna. So, to me, he is one of my all-time favorites from the 1990s. My dad always talked about how he saw him beat Hulk Hogan and how Hulk Hogan should have never won the belt and that Yoko should have had a longer reign as champ. To me, Yoko should have lost the belt at SummerSlam. I mean, if you could have stretched it out to SummerSlam, and instead of Bret Hart, it could have been British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. That's how I feel that it should have went for Yokozuna. All right, coming in at number 2. It's time! It's time! It's Vader! Time! Dun 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 dun. Vader was Brock Lesnar before there was Brock Lesnar. He was intimidating. He was big. He was 6'4". He was 320 pounds. The guy was a monster. When he came into the ring, he didn't do a lot of talking. He had his theme song. Jimsy Cornette came out with the tennis racket. And when Vader got in the ring, he would come into the ring and be ready for a match. And there were days where Vader's matches didn't last long. Like when you saw a Vader match, it only lasted like less than 2 minutes. 2 minutes, match was over. You got Vader bombed. And he was just beating people. And for like a year and a half, he was undefeated. Couldn't nobody break his record. He wrestled Bret Hart. At that time, Bret was the champion. And that was his first championship match against Bret Hart. Lost to Bret Hart. Next time we know, we see him he's facing Kevin Nash as Diesel. And the fact that he almost took the belt from Kevin Nash was interesting. Then we saw him match up against King Kong Bundy, which was a high-profile match. And people wanted to see Vader versus Undertaker because they wanted to see that between these guys, who was the most monstrous character. And it took almost 5 years for that match to happen. Undertaker won just barely because Vader was that huge. Now, Vader started his career in the AWA, NWA, Canada, Japan, Mexico. Everywhere Vader went, he won championships. The problem was when he got to the WWE, you go against politics, you're not going to win a championship. He wrestled Shawn Michaels twice, and he never. And the one thing that I don't understand is they did not want Vader winning the championship because it was time to make Shawn Michaels a star. And Vader said something backstage that got his career ended because when he got to wrestle Kane, Vader got injured, and then we see him in WCW. And when he returned back to WCW, he got used poorly. He got put in situations where they wanted him to just be a joke and a jobber to other characters. And he complained, and then he got to wrestle Goldberg. He got to wrestle Booker T, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Scott Steiner, Lex Luger. And then only in WCW, he got to be a 3-time world heavyweight champion. He's a 6-time tag team champion. And he's been wrestling for like 20 years. And he's another wrestler that came back in 2012 for the 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 episode of Monday Night Raw. And he was unrecognizable. He was in bad shape. He gained more weight. And then he passed away like 2.5 years ago. And to me, it's sad because nobody talks about his career. Nobody talks about those memorable matchups that Vader had. And to me, Vader had that potential. And he was another big man that could do a shooting star press. Before we saw Brock Lesnar do it, Vader was doing it. Like, Vader could be this big, get on the top rope, jump off the top rope, and be oppressive. And to be that big and that athletic, like you're 175 pounds, but he was 300 pounds, that's oppressive. And today's big men, if they wrestled Vader, most of them would probably get their butt whooped because he would make a regular big man pee in their pants. Because he could wrestle British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. He could wrestle Owen Hart. See, a lot of people just thought he was a big fat guy that could just power slam you and that was it. Vader was a lot more in his wrestling career. And to me, he was a good wrestler. Now, outside the company, he didn't really have a lot of friends. He stayed to himself. He tried his best. He had matches with Ric Flair. And to me, he eventually could have been pushed more in WWE. And to me, when they started ignoring him and talking about the guys of the past, they don't like to mention Vader. But Vader was a big part of the good days of WWE. And to me, Vader also had something that you wanted to see. When his matches came, you wanted to see him beat someone. So we'll always remember the man they call Vader. Coming in at number 1 is one of the biggest big men in professional wrestling. He's wrestled for almost 3 decades. He's wrestled in his 30s, his 40s, his 50s. Now he's going to finally be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He is a man who has lasted longer than any wrestler. All the other guys that you've seen, from Shawn Michaels to Chris Jericho to Ultimate Warrior to Batista, they've all come and gone, but one name stays constant in WWE, in professional wrestling, and that is Mark Calaway, his stage name, better known as The Undertaker. He is the man from the dark side. He is the Phenom. He is the one that we watched for years as a kid. As a kid, I never saw the Grand Reaper. The guy came in 1990 and you could hear Tebby DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, and from Death Valley, I give you The Undertaker. And Paul Bearer, God rest his soul, with that little squeaky voice. It was annoying, but it worked. Oh yes, The Undertaker. The Undertaker will get your soul. You will rest in peace. And The Undertaker would when he talked, he would just say a few words. You will pay your damnation. And it was like, they got a golf wrestler that's gonna kick your ass. He came in, the guy was like 7 feet tall, 328 pounds. He would give you a tombstone pile driver. He would jump off the top rope, and it was like the guy could walk on the top rope. And when you go back to his athletic background, I had no idea that he could play basketball. Like, I had no idea that he was trying to play basketball. Like, when you hear stories of him trying to play basketball in high school and college and trying to make it to the NBA, but he got cut and he never got there, I had no idea because him and Kevin Nash were trying to play basketball. And he was in WCW. The first 10 years, his career was terrible. He did not know how to wrestle. He did not know how to do a perfect a fall. At that time in wrestling school, they would teach you how to fall. And he didn't know how to do that. And then when he gets to WWE in 1990 Survivor Series, he's The Undertaker. And when he won his first championship belt, he beat Hulk Hogan. Like, if anyone could beat Hogan, it was him. And then he wrestles Ric Flair, so he has 2 championship matches. Then he has this streak called WrestleMania. He's undefeated. And he's beating people. He beats Giant Gonzalez. God rest his soul, rest in peace. He beats King Kong Bundy. God rest his soul, rest in peace. I mean, they're not here with us today, but he wrestled those legends. He would beat Ric Flair years later. He would beat all these people at WrestleMania. He was 1-0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All of a sudden, he was 23-0, and 16 to 17 years, he was undefeated. He beat Kane twice. He beat Shawn Michaels twice. He beat Triple H 3 times. He beat Mark Henry, Big Show. He beat Randy Orton, Batista, Psycho Sid. All these guys tried and all these guys failed. And it didn't matter if you were the champion or not. You got a match at WrestleMania with The Undertaker and you lost. That either enhanced your career or that hurt your career. And Undertaker got to be the king at WrestleMania. When people wanted to watch WrestleMania matches, the one thing you look for on the card is The Undertaker. You didn't care about all the other people wrestling, you cared about Undertaker. Like, his run lasted longer than the average NFL career, the average NBA career. Most guys, when they hit 40 or 50, their career is finished. He kept going. And the fact that this guy could stay in the game for this long and wrestle everyone is interesting. He became a 4-time champion, 6-time tag team champion, won the Hardcore Championship belt. The only belt he did not win was the Intercontinental title. But that's the one time you don't care that he didn't win that title. And he had high-profile matches. He wrestled The Rock 7 times, Kurt Angle. He beat Kane, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He wrestled so many guys. Batista, Randy Orton. A lot of these new stars. The one match that I think we still wanted to see that we never got to see, and we ask ourselves why this match never happened, Undertaker versus Sting. They're mirror images of each other. I mean, think about it. For years and years in WCW,